Thinking of winning the lotto jackpot? Well, there is an easy way. Combo Play. Choose 4 numbers from 1 to 36. That's a combo 4 at a cost of $64. Match any 4 of the 5 numbers and win the lotto jackpot. There's Combo 6, where you purchase 6 numbers for only $12. Match any 5 of the 6 lotto numbers and hit the jackpot. How about Combo 7? That's a purchase of 7 lotto numbers for $42. Match any 5 of the 7 numbers and you will win the jackpot. There are also Combo 3, Combo 8 and Combo 9 lotto plays. Visit the NLA headquarters in Pauls Avenue or WhatsApp 495-6886 for more details. Lotto, you have to be in it to win it. Boom, boom.
No place like home because we need you. I really need you. Because we need you. I really need you. Come home to me. Come home to me. Come home to me. Don't no promise from today. I go show like I never show you play. Like I never won. Like I never won before. Just to show you what's up. You know what I'm saying? I will never let you down again.
Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Roundtable Talk. It's Wednesday, March 8th, International Women's Day 2023, and this year's UN theme for its observation is Digital Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. The theme is highlighting the need for inclusive and transformative technology for digital education. On this edition of Roundtable Talk, we have with us none other than Nelsia Robinson Hazer, veteran women's rights activist and chair of the CDW. We also have the first female CEO of Banks Holdings Limited Group of Companies, Shafia London, and we have software engineer and founder of the Women in Tech Caribbean Community, Janika John. All three ladies, a powerhouse I think we have as far as the panel is concerned. Today, we're going to start the ball by asking Nelsia Robinson to give us the contextual background with regards to International Women's Day and the Beijing Platform of Action to get the conversation going. Nelsia?
Okay, thank you very much, and a wonderful evening to my sister panelists. I begin with a salute to all the women, our mothers, our sisters, who have worked so hard in the past and upon whose shoulders we stand. Almost 28 years ago, the Fourth World Conference on Women was held in Beijing, China. And that conference was considered to be leaving a blueprint towards women's development. It dealt with 12 critical areas of concern: women and poverty, education and training of women, women and health, violence against women, women and armed conflict, women and the economy, women in power and decision-making, insufficient mechanisms for the advancement of women, the human rights of women, women and the media, women and the environment, and the last one for which we fought so strongly was to address the girl child. This platform for action in these areas was seen as if worked on together by the NGOs and by government that it would do well for the advancement of women. However, after the first 5 or 10 years, it was seen that the nature of the advancement we were looking for, it did not take place. So efforts were redoubled. In the recent past, we have seen a lot of attention being devoted to violence against women because it is an issue that covers all parts of the world. While the other areas would be of concern, in some areas it is not as critical as in others. So we in St. Vincent and the Grenadines have tended to follow the United Nations declarations from time to time. So in the case of International Women's Day, it was fought for since 1908, and it was in 1911 that the UN did the first official celebration. The years have rolled on, and at different points, it has been a lot of attention has been paid on various areas, but we have not seen it being translated as it should. And even though the United Nations chooses a theme, it is for the country to, to walk with it towards what is really the issue in the country. So the theme for this year is very relevant. But as I speak, I see there is an area of women's development that is somewhat neglected. And that area I see as women and health. So as we continue our discussion, I would like to see how it is revealed that the theme for this year, how it could be honed, how the activities on it could be used towards women's health, which is a very critical area, not only here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but in other areas. So I will rest my thoughts at this point.
Okay, so I guess somewhere along the line we could talk about how the whole question of innovation and technology can be used to improve women's health. I'm going to go to the two younger panelists, younger, quote unquote, and ask them when we talk about digital transformation, what exactly are we talking about? And I'll have Janika answer first, and then Shafia with her background as a manager in this area. So Janika, the software engineer, digital transformation, what does it entail?
Sure. It depends on, which area we want to focus on when it comes to digital transformation. We're living in a space now, we're living in a world now where everything is digital. All aspects of all, let's say, facets of life can be digital. And so transformation can be anything from transforming the medical sector, the way that we store documents. It can be focusing more on skills. Are we going to upskill our people? So it depends on which aspect we want to focus on. But one thing that I do want to mention is on the the basis of all of the digital transformation movements that we try to do within St. Vincent, one thing we should really focus a lot on, I think, is access to internet. Equitable access to internet, cheap access to internet, access to fast, reliable, stable internet, I think is the key, because we can't talk about digital these days without talking about connectivity. Yes, there are some aspects that you can do offline, but a big part of the way that the world is moving forward has to do with connecting to the internet. And so, we could take this discussion a little bit further, but when I think about digital transformation in the context of St. Vincent, this is where I will focus on the most.
Okay, it's kind of ironic that we're talking about digital transformation, and I don't think I'm hearing you well enough. What I'll do, I'll take a break and see if we can sort that out, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. And Shafia, I think it's your turn. What is digital transformation from where you sit?
All right, so good evening, everyone, and to the ladies, happy International Women's Day. Um, from a business perspective, this agenda of International Women's Day, all about innovation and technology for gender equality, what it does is it really serves as an important reminder of the immense potential that we have if we can accelerate gender equality and women's empowerment. Digital transformation provides a platform to truly unleash the potential of women and girls to become active agents of change as we talk about transformation. Um, so it's really about how do we make women more involved in the digital space, and to utilize the digital tools in not just their everyday, but also for building their creative and cultural skills to express their ideas and their opinions, and more so for entrepreneurship opportunities, for careers, and to even build themselves to find employment. So it's really about unleashing, for me, the potential that women truly have. And I think across the world, we are beginning to recognize that women are disadvantaged when it comes to digital adoption, that women have lower access of digital technology than boys, and that also women and girls are not benefiting the same way from digital technology as men and boys. So how do we make it a reality to close this digital divide in the access and usage of women and girls?
So the next obvious question is, how do we do that?
There are numerous ways that you could do that. As a starting point, I think it's important for us as businesses, as governments, as civic societies to make a greater and I would say more sustained investment in increasing women and girls' digital literacy and their familiarity with technology. We need to enable women and girls to participate effectively in the digital space. So they need to gain access. They need it for education, for healthcare, for banking, for e-commerce, etc. And so we need to find ways of getting them more involved and have them have them access the digital space more. I think one of the panelists, Janika, mentioned that as simple as access to computers. We can start there because we want them to become more familiar with technology. Basic skills, however, is not enough. So in addition to being aware, in addition to having access, we also need to find ways of promoting women and girls in the ICT sector by developing their skills in areas such as coding, where we all know that girls and women are critically underrepresented. So again, together with government, businesses, and various other partners, how do we need to provide training to women to bring them into the IT sector so that they can enhance their skills, and now we will have more female role models who in turn can pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, the STEM field basically. What is really interesting is a lot of research is showing that by 2050 thereabouts, 75% of jobs will be related to STEM. And most of these are going to be crucially connected to technology. So there needs to be a concerted effort by the government, academia, civil society, and crucially the private sector to develop the skills of women and girls in the ICT sector so that they are not left behind. Um, and then the last thing I would say in terms of how we could do this is that women need to be involved in the decision making around digital technology. So whatever changes a country, a government, a business is making, the perspective of women need to be considered. We need to ensure that today's emerging data-driven solutions consider the perspective of women. Online content technology needs to be developed not just by men, for men, but with women and for women, so that as a people, we can respond to the specific needs and priorities, especially within a regulatory framework, because we know technology, whilst it has its good side, it also has a number of ills, and we need to be able to protect the rights of women and girls in that technological space against things like cyber harassment, cyber violence. We need to make sure that women's specific needs and priorities are tackled as we develop technology in the various spaces.
Okay,
So those would be the three main areas I would say how we get women involved.
great. Janika, your take?
Yeah, I really love that you mentioned us being involved in the decision making space as women, because a lot of times we see areas where there are a lot of men involved, a lot of men making the decisions, and even the software. For example, you mentioned I'm a software engineer. I work on a team with men. And women make up 50% of the population. We also make up sometimes even more of the users of the software that we release. But we see ourselves in situations where there's only men at the table making the decisions in terms of what features would work best for certain people. How do we release these features and so forth? And it's really important, as you mentioned, that we're there at the table. But even further to that, I would say, I think you mentioned it as well, and I would like to double down on that. Mentorship, seeing an example of someone who is in this field, what they're working on, how they, what path they followed to get there, is quite important. I've had the opportunity to lead or to teach, let's say, a coding camp this summer in St. Vincent, last summer, actually. And the opportunity to speak to the students, let them know they had so many questions. How did you even become a software engineer? How do I become a software engineer? What should I miss? What did you study in school? What did you study at UE? And I mentioned to them, when I was at Girls High School, for example, I did not even focus on computer science initially. And I still ended up in this field. I actually studied natural sciences. So things like that kind of help the youth and women, girls and women, realize that, hey, this could be a field for me. It doesn't matter necessarily what background I have. This is an area where there's so much information available online. Oftentimes, sometimes too much information. People can feel overwhelmed in terms of what's out there. Like I mentioned, tech as well is something that it's very pervasive. It's present in so many different areas and so many different fields that sometimes people feel overwhelmed. And mentorship can really help with that. Getting to speak to somebody, understand what their interests were, what problems they were trying to solve, can really help. So those are my
Would
thoughts
you
there.
say you had a head start somewhat? Did you?
Well, I was funny enough, I was always exposed to tech. So my father, for example, he had computer classes. I would sit in at the computer classes. I would always be in the background tinkering with the computers. But funny enough, even though I had been exposed to tech from a very young age, I still did not see myself in the field, working in the field. And that kind of comes back to my point as when it comes to mentorship, because sometimes it's difficult to become something when you don't see it. Even though you might have all the tools available to you, even though you might be fully immersed in it, sometimes it just takes seeing somebody that looks like you working in the field, sometimes somebody who is from your island or even from the Caribbean working in the field, for you to really open your eyes and say, hey, wait a second. This person is working here in this field. Maybe this is something I can do too. Maybe I should even reach out to them. And you might be surprised. The person might be able to help you understand exactly what steps they took to get there.
Okay, would all three of you agree that there is a digital gap between probably my age group and your age group? And how do we bridge that gap? Cousin Elsie, your thoughts first, I think.
Yes, I know. Well, it has to do with how our education went. moving from primary education. Like when I was doing primary school, we had a blackboard on which the news was written up every day. The head teacher or somebody else wrote it. That was the technology for us to know what was going on in the world. So that was primary school. And then in secondary school, well, there wasn't really a blackboard, but radio was more prevalent, and you listen to the radio and so on. And in my time, it was the typewriter keys that we were pounding to tone out, all the letters and so on. And that's why I said in the beginning, we are standing on our mother's shoulders, because in that time of technology, it brought us to this point where it has been a sort of galloping along into this digital area. In terms of bridging that gap, I think there are many seniors, who handle the devices very well, because classes were available, and many of the seniors did not think it a shame then to go and do it, because some of their relatives and so on would be abroad and want to communicate with them. So they master the cell phone, they master the WhatsApp, and they do things very well, right? So the training that we were mentioned, in some of that training should also be available to the seniors. And if I
Okay.
can, well, I have a little bee in my bonnet I want to talk about, but maybe my sister panelists can come in on
Okay.
how to bridge the gap.
Okay, we'll take a break and come back and hear from the other ladies in just a moment. Back in just a moment.
You can increase your chances of winning the Super 6 jackpot with a combo play. Remember, Super 6 numbers are from 1 to 28. Choose any 5 Super 6 numbers. That's a combo 5 for $69. Match any 5 of the 6 numbers and you will win the jackpot. Choose 7 Super 6 numbers for $21. Match any 6 of the 7 numbers and win the jackpot. There's more. Combo 8, where you purchase 8 Super 6 numbers for $84. Match any 6 of the 8 numbers and you will win the jackpot. There are also Combo 3 and Combo 4 Super 6 plays. Visit the NLA headquarters in Pauls Avenue or WhatsApp 495-6886 for more details. Super 6, bigger jackpots, more chances to win.
Welcome back. Before we took our break, we were talking about how do we bridge that digital gap here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and certainly around the rest of the region. And Janika and Shafia were about to share their thoughts on this.
Okay, so you're talking mainly here about age gap. Yes, there is perhaps a wider gap, even more so between the genders than what exists in terms of age. But Ms. Robinson is absolutely correct. It's really two things. One is the awareness and training, and two, I strongly suspect is also fair. I say fair because if you are accustomed to doing something a certain way, as technology evolves, it could become quite intimidating to adapt to the new technology. Some people are braver than others and they launch out and they try it. Others would remain quite conservative. I mean, there are people, for example, who tell you they're not going to read the news online. They're going to stick to their newspaper, and that's it. So it's all about awareness and overcoming that fear. Once we can find a way to get more women to learn the process of what it entails to use technology, then we could maximize their usage. And it's a slow process, but it's one that it needs to have dedicated attention. So if there's going to be a class, we tend to just have a class and all age groups could mix, but perhaps different age groups need different attention. There might be embarrassing moments that they would feel like they're moving slower, but it's not that you're slow, it's just you're not accustomed to it. My 4-year-old can do things on a phone and on a TV that I don't know how he does it. He can't even read, but he somehow knows how to turn the buttons and put things where they're not supposed to be. So
Yes.
it's almost as if you're born with it these days. So it's all about building the awareness, training persons, and helping them to overcome the fear.
Janika?
Yes, definitely. If I could add to that, I love that you mentioned having different age groups when it comes to classes, because there's something funny that I've noticed, and I've been discussing this with a few people, and I've seen even people online talking about this, bringing this up. It's funny when you think about the younger generation, you might think that they're actually the most tech savvy generation. However, we've been observing recently that there are actually things that the younger generation cannot do because they have not been exposed to it. Why? Because of the way that technology has evolved. So the younger generation is using an abstraction of the technology. For example, my generation would have been exposed to in the 90s. Maybe I'm dating myself here a little bit. But when I would have first started using the computer, I mentioned I was in computer classes and so forth. I saw it evolve from command line prompts to what we call a GUI, graphical user interface, to tinkering with file systems. Then there was the age of MySpace, social media just coming into play, using a little bit of HTML and so forth to style your page. However, the youngest generation that we have now, they are standing on the backs of the technology, all this advancement that has already happened, and they are now using an abstraction of this user interface. So oftentimes you would find that the younger generation, while they might be more advanced in certain areas, they might actually have needs, special needs. For example, they might not know how to navigate a file system as quickly as somebody from the 90s or even the older generation. When it comes to certain shortcuts that you might say to yourself, what, they don't know this, but because they don't have the need. For example, Control A, Control Z, selecting all on a document and so forth. They do everything with their finger. They're used to using the touchscreen devices and so forth almost intuitively. And so that's why I would really double down on this point of separating by age groups, really focusing and honing in on the specific needs in order to get the maximum effect in terms of educating people when it comes to technology, and not forgetting the older generation as well. As I said, technology is very pervasive. It's something that we all have to use in all areas of life, and it's important that we all get exposed to it.
How do we embrace the whole concept of equity in innovation and technology? How do we do that?
Well, I think that the contributions from my sister panelists lead to that, because if that exposure takes place, then definitely women are going to rise. They're going to rise, in that area. And since we are speaking equity, we have to make opportunities available to all. So if in the gender, in terms of the gender gap, if opportunities are available, to males, let's say that, and there we see a gap where women are left behind, well, we have to put some more opportunities, some more meeting places where women will be able, to rise. So again, it boils down to training and it boils down to resources. But in terms of what may be seen as fear, and from the discussion I am seeing a fear in both the seniors and the younger, based on what Janika was saying, because it may appear that they know everything. Consider being in a group where a senior would quicker discern that, well, really, I thought that I didn't know, but I am seeing this one, doesn't know. So we have to get rid of that kind of fear. And I think if it is related to everyday life, how do we relate it to everyday life, right? And I began by talking about the 12 critical areas of concern. So if I figure that this technology is going to lift the women out of poverty, that is an incentive, to get to take part there. If it is going to do something better with my health, which is my little topic that I am sitting on, right? If it is going to help me in what I am doing, I think that is an incentive. So we need to do a more adult education approach in terms of bringing out what people already have and what need to be strengthened. And as I know time is going, I want to touch on a little BIC I have in my bonnet. In a mention is made of data, and this technology is meant to bring up the data. And a lot of our plans, you would hear the question that we don't have enough data, so we can't put a project in place, we can't give. And research continues to go on. There is research in everything, and still there is not enough data. So my question is, if we have a minute, that those of you who are deep in the technology, if we can say something about data, how we can gather more data through the technology, how we can make it available so that when the planners are there, they will not be saying we cannot go ahead because we don't have data, and spend 2 years in doing a research to get the data. And as the proverb goes, while the grass is growing, the ox is starving, and our critical areas of concern are not getting dealt with. Thank
Well,
you.
interestingly enough, I know Janika was on a panel this morning, and data, the whole question of data was one of the things that received quite a bit of attention. So I think that she may well have quite a lot to say about that. But what we'll do, we'll take a break and come back and talk some more about that. Back.
The National Lotteries Authority introduces the Lotto app for all Android and iPhones. Your free download available at nlasvg.com. Whether at home, work, or simply having fun, get all NLA game results at your fingertips. View all draws of the National Lotteries Authority on your handset or tablet with the user-friendly Lotto app. Download today at nlasvg.com. The Lotto app.
No place like home because we need you. I really need you. Because we need you. I really need you. Come home to me. Come home to me. Come home. She said, don't I promise from today I go show like I never show you way, like I never like I never went before, just to show you what's up. You know what I'm saying? Cause I will never let you down again.
welcome back. When we took our last break, we were talking about data, the importance of data, and I think Janika was about to respond to that.
Yes, indeed. I would have spoken about it, as you said, on the panel this morning as well, also on the occasion of International Women's Day. But, where do I even begin? You spoke about it being your bonnet, Nelsie. This is one of my biggest ones. I think we have a lot of data already available in the Caribbean, but for some reason, we're not taking the steps to make it available in an open way. One of the common ways that a lot of governments or bodies, let's say, so not just governments, also private sector, make data available to the public, just because, data is, as the word suggests, it's not information yet. If we give all the data that we have to the public in a way that they can consume it and change it into information in an accessible way, you will find you have access to a lot more information than you think. But what I wanted to say is what a lot of governments do and a lot of private sector do is that they make something called an API available. And what they do is the data that they do have, so we have to, there's a lot of things to discuss here when it comes to safety, data, and so forth. I will get into that in a little while. But the point I wanted to make was when it comes to things that should be publicly accessible data. If we think about instead of uploading a PDF file, a simple change as uploading, instead of uploading it as a PDF document, uploading it as an Excel file can be a gateway to an API, a very simplistic API that the developers in the region or even outside the region can access and process using code. So if, for example, you have a report on a study that was done, rather than uploading it to the website as an PDF, as I mentioned, you upload it, as an Excel file. You make the endpoints available to these developers. These developers can actually connect to it, transform it into different websites. They can even run algorithms, calculations on, the data and support that was found and, extrapolate the data. I would have done that, for example, with some of the COVID information that was available globally. Caribbean islands were involved. And because they had APIs, because they had CSVs, so that's the endpoint when it comes to Excel files that you can make available. They had CSVs available. I was able to pick out which ones were Caribbean islands and present information that's relevant to us. Another point I wanted to make, though, is when it comes to privacy, I think we're not doing enough in the Caribbean region to make sure that we protect data. Data is like the digital gold right now. That's why we have things like GDPR in the European Union. The US has a big fight right now against TikTok, where they just passed a bill, I think it was yesterday, to try to ban TikTok. Why? They're very scared of China having access to users' data who are based in the US. And while I see all these world powers, let's say, fighting to protect the data of their citizens, I don't see enough in the Caribbean region right now for us to not only protect the data that we have, but try to make sure that that data comes home, because it's concerning, let's say, when I think about how much data, sensitive data, which can be extrapolated into information, as I mentioned before, is available on Caribbean citizens that we don't have access to. It's something really to think about, something to focus on. So it's twofold. We have to think a lot about security, as I said, but making the data that we already have available, which is a lot available to developers and technical people in a way that's accessible.
Shafia, from where you sit as a CEO of a major company?
I mean, the last point that Janika made there about security as a company, that is critical. I remember a few months ago, a major company in Barbados, their entire operations are more or less shut down, and they were held at ransom for their data. So someone basically penetrated them and demanded cash to release the data that they had on their customers, and of course their own information that they would need for business continuity. So beyond the individual, we have to also think about businesses as well. And Janika's absolutely right. A lot of businesses don't pay enough attention to protecting their information. Um, and it may seem an opposing force to what Ms. Robinson spoke about in terms of how do you release the data but at the same time protect it. But there you just need to decide which is proprietary and which you could share. And so from the aspect of research, etc., universities, perhaps there could be a more open-minded approach, so that persons can access that data and could use it for their purposes. But from a business and individual perspective, I strongly endorse us paying more attention to the protection of data.
If I may add to that, I just wanted to say as well, something I would really love to see within the region is protection for people who discover security flaws. Many years ago, internationally, in the international community, people who discovered, so white hat hackers, as we call them, who discovered security flaws in very big systems, banks and support, they were persecuted because the first reaction was, oh, you figured out how to break into this banking system, you should be persecuted. But after a while, we realized, no, actually, if we reward these people through stuff such as bug bounty, security programs, etc., we could actually find flaws a lot faster if we entice people to actually tell us when they find these vulnerabilities. But even before we get to the point where we pay people who discover vulnerabilities, I would really like us to focus on language that protects people. Because as it stands right now, if I discover a security flaw, I might be hesitant to even raise it to the attention of certain businesses for fear of being punished or so forth. So we really need to focus on language protecting them at first, in order to kind of, raise the chances that somebody would actually point out when they see these flaws.
Okay, Nelsia, I think you still want to hear how we can use innovation and technology to provide equity in women's health and their lives generally.
I still want to hear that, but I want to say to Shafia that what you said is it's not going against what I'm saying in terms of releasing data. I have been in touch with funding agencies in different areas. And when you talk about something in particular that you want to attend it to, you want to apply to it, they will say things like, well, that is too small. It is too small. In term, your grant may not go into millions, but they will say that it is too small because it takes too much to administer. So I won't get that grant. Others would be saying, well, there's not enough data on this thing. There's not enough data. Okay? So that is what I am referring to. And I am very heartened that from the responses, there is indeed a lot of data. And I myself think that because of seeing so much research being done. So how can that be used? Not by releasing everything that anybody can go into it, but to be able to say, well, enough data is available so that we can, do these projects to bring relief. Because as our hostess is saying, I particularly look at women's health, but I also look at the 11 critical areas. And I think that in the research and the data and the cancers and all these different, NCCDs and so on, there still is a feeling that there is not enough data, enough knowledge in terms of how some relief can come. And we just go along with giving medication, or people may just die because, there is not that access. So how can the technology be used to make people, maybe to make people more aware? Maybe that is a simple question I want to
I
hear.
want to jump in here, and this is from an observation of going back to school recently.
Yes.
I strongly think our universities in the region, they have a large part to play. in transforming the digital space to provide that access that you speak about. At master's level, at PhD levels, we're churning out students who study a lot of areas that are relevant to Caribbean people, our lifestyle, our health, economy, very specific, and information that could be used to drive good decision making. But what I found is oftentimes they're done, they're typed, and that's it. They're not made accessible to anyone else. So you have this library of information that's either sitting in someone's email, or because in the past it would have been on their desk, but at least now we're typing them. But they're sitting somewhere on their online platforms for submission. Um, Even if they're not peer reviewed, for example, let's say at the master's level, your thesis might not be at the same level of a PhD that is considered peer reviewed and accepted as validated, but it's usually sound information that could stimulate discussion and could actually start the conversation to transform the way we do things in the region. But what we've done is just develop these electronic databases that are not accessible to anyone else. So the question is, how do our universities and our academia get involved in ensuring that this information that we're churning out and producing every day, that it becomes more accessible? I know that in some countries they have open source libraries where you are almost mandated to upload your study into this space that other students could actually access, and anybody can access. In some instances, you pay, because at the end of the day, it's still people's intellectual property, so there might be a price to it, but at least you can access it. Whereas in the Caribbean, I find it's there, it exists. We have some of the brightest brains in the world, but we don't do anything with it.
You know, I am listening to this and I'm hearing an opportunity. As a web developer, we're having this discussion. Maybe we should take this offline and start a website.
There you go.
But on a serious note, this is why it's so important, I think, for us to have training in how to do these things, because it always starts with a problem. I mean, this is why technology exists. Technology exists to make our life easier. It doesn't just exist to develop things into the ether. We make things to solve a problem. And here we see a very clear problem, which can be solved digitally. It can be solved by, the development of a website, collaborating, for example, with UWI, doing maybe a few interviews in the beginning to find out, okay, how big is this body of work?
I
What's the
like
best
this.
way to solve it? And so this, it comes back to the point why it's so important for us to be able to create the solutions that we are looking for, because nobody understands our problems better than us ourselves.
Great. Look, you see, so we've started something here this evening. Before we go, I want you to tell us a little bit about your Caribbean Women in Tech Caribbean organization, what it does, what are your objectives, etc.
Yes, so I started Women in Tech Caribbean in 2019. Right now, we connect around 300 girls and women. Some live in the Caribbean, some live abroad, and they work in a lot of different fields in tech. I mentioned, coding a lot. That's my personal field, but tech is so broad. We have people who, for example, are Web3 consultants, data scientists, people who work in no coding roles, such as project managers, product owners, etc. And the whole point of the space, or the whole point of the community, is to connect people. I talk a lot about mentorship. I talk a lot about how technology is important when it comes to solving problems, and how we understand our problems, but we also need to be connected to people in order to build solutions. The community exists for that reason. So, for example, Sheffield, you would have mentioned, you're in school, you observe this thing. Maybe if you're a part of this community, you could find, for example, a programmer, a web developer, researchers right in the same community who could come together and build businesses. We are in the Caribbean, we are very different, I would say, to some of the other communities I've observed living abroad. a lot of them immediately they find each other, they get together, and that's how a lot of big companies start. If you think about Google, Facebook, they all started from friends, groups of friends who went to the same school, they went to Harvard, they went to Stanford, etc. They were in the same class together, they had an idea, discussion much like the one that we just had, and a new, $1 million company was born. It begs the question, why aren't we doing these things? We're not connecting enough. And so that's why Women in Tech Caribbean was founded. And right now we meet every last Sunday of the month. And we kind of connect. We talk about problems, as I mentioned, and we try to solve them within the group. One member, for example, she was looking for a job. Somebody else was actually the head of a company that was hiring in that area. They connected together, and she now works at that company. She's actually also Vincentian, coincidentally. And so, yes, that's the whole point of the community, making the world smaller in this space.
Great. I think that's a perfect note on which to end this edition of Roundtable Talk, our special International Women's Day edition. Thank you very much, Shafia, London. Thank you very much, Janika, John. Thank you very much, Nelsie Robinson. Until next week, Wednesday, do enjoy the rest of your International Women's Day. Good evening.
The National Lotteries Authority introduces the Lotto app for all Android and iPhones. Your free download available at nlasvg.com. Whether at home, work, or simply having fun, get all NLA game results at your fingertips. View all draws of the National Lotteries Authority on your handset or tablet with the user-friendly Lotto app. Download today at nlasvg.com. The Lotto app.
No place like home because we need you. I really need you. Because we need you. I really need you. Come home to me. Come home to me. Come home to me. Don't no promise from today. I go show like I never show you play. Like I never play. Like I never won before. Just to show you what's up. You know what I'm saying? I will never let you down again.